Millionaire CEO left and divorced his pregnant ex. 5 years later, he saw her with twins. They're mine. Charles Brooks stood frozen in the middle of a charity gala that cost more than most people's annual salary, staring at 2 children who had his eyes. His voice came out broken, barely a whisper. They're mine, aren't they? Ashley Campbell didn't flinch. She'd spent 5 years preparing for this moment, rehearsing it in bathroom mirrors and sleepless nights, building walls so high that even his shock couldn't scale them. Biologically, yes. In every other way that matters, that remains to be seen. The little boy stepped forward, gray-green eyes blazing with a protectiveness that seemed impossible for someone barely 4 feet tall. Who are you? You're making my mommy's face do that thing it does when she's pretending not to be upset. Charles looked at this small person who carried his intensity like an inheritance, and something inside him shattered into pieces he didn't know how to reassemble. I'm your father, and I didn't know you existed until about 30 seconds ago. The little girl tugged on her mother's hand, her voice cutting through the tension with the devastating simplicity of childhood. Mommy, if he's our dad, why is he crying? Ashley watched her billionaire ex-husband sink to his knees in the middle of a ballroom filled with the most powerful people in the city, tears streaming down his face, and she felt nothing. Or at least, that's what she told herself. Now, before I take you through what happened next, before I show you how this story unfolds in ways that will challenge everything you think you know about love and betrayal and second chances, I need you to understand something. This isn't a fairy tale. This is a story about a woman who survived the unsurvivable. A man who spent 5 years becoming someone he should have been all along. And 2 children caught between parents who were still learning how to stop destroying each other. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, if you've ever wondered whether people can actually change, if you've ever built walls so high you forgot there was a world outside them, this story is for you. Stay with me until the end. Because what happens between Ashley Campbell and Charles Brooks is going to test everything you believe about forgiveness, about family, and about the price we pay for protecting ourselves from pain. Let's go back to the beginning of the end, and the end of the beginning. 3 hours before Ashley Campbell walked into the Westbrook Charity Gala, she stood in her Denver apartment staring at a dress she wasn't sure she had the courage to wear. The gown was emerald green, custom made by a designer who owed her a favor after she'd transformed his cramped studio into something magazine-worthy. It was the kind of dress that demanded attention, that refused to let its wearer fade into the background. 5 years ago, she would have worn it without hesitation. 5 years ago, she'd believed she deserved to be seen. Now she understood that visibility was dangerous, that being seen meant being vulnerable, that the spotlight she'd once craved had burned her so badly she still carried the scars. Mommy, you look like a princess. Ashley turned to find Bella standing in the doorway, her auburn curls wild despite the careful brushing Ashley had done 20 minutes ago. Her daughter was wearing the velvet dress they'd picked out together, purple because Bella insisted that purple was the only acceptable color for important occasions, and her eyes were wide with the kind of wonder that only 4-year-olds could sustain. Thank you, baby. You look like a princess, too. I know. Bella smoothed her dress with the self-assurance of someone who had never doubted her own magnificence. Bellamy says I look like a grape, but he's wrong. Grapes don't have sparkles. From somewhere down the hall came her son's voice, measured and matter-of-fact in the way that always reminded Ashley of someone she was trying very hard not to think about. Grapes could have sparkles if someone put glitter on them. It's theoretically possible. Bellamy appeared beside his sister, his miniature suit slightly askew despite Ashley's best efforts. He was holding a book about bridge engineering that he'd begged her to let him bring, and his expression suggested he was already calculating how many minutes of adult conversation he'd have to endure before he could retreat into its pages. These were her children, her miracles, the 2 humans she'd built from nothing but determination and desperation, who somehow contained the best parts of her and the best parts of a man who'd proven himself unworthy of both. They had his eyes, both of them, gray-green and observant, missing nothing. It was a painful gift, those eyes. Every time Ashley looked at her children, she saw echoes of the man who'd signed divorce papers without ever knowing what he was leaving behind. Mommy, why do you look scared? Bellamy's question cut through her thoughts with surgical precision. He'd always been able to read her, even when she thought she was hiding everything behind perfect composure. His emotional intelligence was as advanced as his intellectual curiosity, and sometimes Ashley wondered if she'd somehow transmitted all her survival instincts directly into his DNA. I'm not scared, sweetheart. Just thinking. You always say you're thinking when you're actually worried about something. Bellamy adjusted his book under his arm with scholarly dignity. Is it about the party? Are there going to be bad people there? The honesty of the question made Ashley's chest tight. She'd worked so hard to protect them from her past, to build a life where they never had to know about the man who'd chosen his company over their mother, who'd let a marriage die through neglect and indifference. But children were perceptive. They absorbed tension like sponges absorbed water, and no amount of careful performance could hide the tremor in her hands as she'd opened that invitation 2 weeks ago. "There are no bad people," she said carefully. "Just people Mommy hasn't seen in a long time. And seeing people from the past can be a little overwhelming. Like when I saw Marcus from my old preschool at the grocery store." Bella offered helpfully. "I didn't know what to say because we weren't friends anymore, but we used to be friends and it was weird." Exactly like that. Ashley smiled despite herself. Sometimes grown-ups have the same feelings about running into old friends. Was this person your friend? The question came from Bellamy, and Ashley could see him filing away information, constructing theories, doing the analytical work that came as naturally to him as breathing. She considered lying. She'd become very good at lying over the past 5 years, at constructing narratives that protected her children from truths they weren't ready to understand. But something about tonight felt different. Something about the weight of that invitation, the inevitability of what was coming, made her want to offer at least a sliver of honesty. "He was more than a friend once. A long time ago, before you were born." "What happened?" "People change, baby. Sometimes people who love each other stop being good at loving each other. And when that happens, it's better to walk away than to keep hurting each other." "Did he hurt you?" Ashley looked at her son, at those gray-green eyes that saw everything, and she made a decision that she would second-guess for weeks to come. "Yes, he did. Not on purpose, I don't think. But sometimes the things that hurt most are the things people do without meaning to." Bellamy processed this with the solemnity of a judge considering evidence. "If he hurt you, I don't like him." "You don't have to like him, baby. You just have to be polite if we see him." That's what grown-ups do. Bella had been following this conversation with increasing impatience, her 4-year-old attention span reaching its limits. "Can we go now? I want to see the fancy building. You said there would be chandeliers." "There will be chandeliers," Ashley confirmed, grateful for the interruption. "And fancy food and lots of people in pretty dresses. Will there be cake?" "Probably. Then we should definitely go." Ashley took one last look at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back was someone she'd constructed deliberately, piece by piece, from the ruins of who she used to be. This version of Ashley Campbell owned a design firm with a $40 million contract. This version had raised 2 children alone, had built something from nothing, had proven that survival was possible even when it felt like drowning. This version didn't need anyone, especially not the man who taught her that needing people was the fastest way to be destroyed. "Let's go," she said, taking her children's hands. "Let's go see those chandeliers." Across the country, in a Seattle penthouse that cost more than most people would earn in a lifetime, Charles Brooks was having an argument with his reflection. He looked successful. He looked powerful. He looked like the kind of man who appeared on magazine covers and gave keynote speeches at conferences where admission cost $5,000 a plate. He looked like someone who had everything. The problem was that the man in the mirror knew the truth, knew that the penthouse was empty, that the success was hollow, that all the zeros in his bank account couldn't fill the space where something essential used to be. "You need to actually leave for the gala at some point, sir." Charles turned to find his assistant, Nina, standing in the doorway with the patient expression of someone who'd spent 3 years managing his schedule and his moods. She was holding a tablet that probably contained 17 urgent messages he was supposed to have responded to already. "I'm aware. You've been standing there for 12 minutes. I timed it. That's not creepy at all. It's my job to make sure you show up to events that have your name on them." Nina crossed her arms with the comfort of someone who knew she was indispensable. "The Brooks Foundation Charity Gala. You know, the foundation you started. The event you're hosting. The one with 300 people who are expecting to see you. I know what it is. Then why are you standing in your bedroom looking like you're about to face a firing squad?" Charles didn't answer immediately. He wasn't sure how to explain the feeling that had been sitting in his chest for weeks, ever since the guest list for tonight's event had crossed his desk, and he'd seen a name he hadn't let himself think about in years. Ashley Campbell, Campbell Design Studio. Confirmed. She'd RSVP'd, yes. After 5 years of silence, 5 years of building separate lives on opposite sides of the country, she was going to be in the same room as him. and he had absolutely no idea what he was supposed to do with that information. Nothing, probably. Nod politely if they happened to cross paths. Make small talk about the weather or the auction items. Pretend that she was just another guest at just another event, rather than the woman whose absence had left a hole in his life that no amount of success had ever managed to fill. "I'm fine," he told Nina, which was a lie. "Just thinking." "You're always thinking. That's your problem." "I didn't realize thinking was a problem." "It is when it keeps you from actually doing things." Nina's voice softened slightly, the professional veneer cracking just enough to show genuine concern. "You've been different lately. Distracted. My therapist would probably say you're processing something." "Your therapist would be right." Charles finally turned away from the mirror. "But processing will have to wait. I have 300 people expecting me to be charming." "You're always charming. It's the rest of us who have to deal with the aftermath." Charles almost smiled at that. Almost. But the weight in his chest was too heavy for genuine amusement, and the smile died before it reached his eyes. He'd been in therapy himself for 3 years now. Twice a week, sometimes more when things got complicated. He'd spent thousands of hours examining the choices he'd made, the patterns he'd fallen into, the ways he'd systematically destroyed everything that mattered in pursuit of things that ultimately meant nothing. He knew now what he'd done wrong. Knew that he'd prioritized work over people, achievement over connection, the empire he was building over the woman who'd wanted nothing more than to be part of his life. He'd learned. He'd changed. He'd become someone who understood that success without purpose was just expensive loneliness. But learning didn't undo the past. Changing didn't bring back the years he'd wasted. And becoming someone better didn't mean he deserved anything from the people he'd hurt along the way. "Let's go," he said, "before I talk myself out of it." The Grand Metropolitan Hotel was the kind of venue that existed specifically to remind people of their place in the hierarchy of money and power. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings that soared high enough to make everyone feel small. Marble floors reflected light in ways that seemed almost supernatural. Every surface gleamed with the polish of staff who probably earned less in a year than the champagne budget for a single event. Ashley stepped into the ballroom with her children flanking her like tiny, well-dressed bodyguards, and she felt the familiar surge of determination that had carried her through every difficult moment of the past 5 years. She belonged here now, not because of who she used to be married to, but because of who she'd become. Campbell Design Studio had earned its place at tables like this, had proven itself through work and reputation, and the kind of success that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. "Mommy, look." Bella's whisper was filled with awe. She was staring up at the chandeliers with the expression of someone witnessing a miracle. "I told you they'd be beautiful. They're more than beautiful. They're magical." Ashley smiled despite her nerves. This was why she'd agreed to bring them tonight, despite the risks. Her children deserved to see that their mother moved through these spaces with confidence, that she wasn't hiding or ashamed, that the life she'd built for them included rooms like this one. The event was already in full swing. Hundreds of guests in designer clothing, clutching champagne flutes and making the kind of conversation that was really just networking wearing a tuxedo. Ashley recognized several faces from her industry, potential clients and current partners, and the usual constellation of people who showed up at these things. She also recognized, with a jolt that almost stopped her heart, a familiar silhouette across the room. Charles Brooks stood by the windows, surrounded by a small crowd of admirers, looking exactly like the magazine covers that featured him quarterly. He'd aged in the way wealthy men aged, which was to say barely at all. His dark hair showed more silver at the temples than she remembered, but it only made him look more distinguished. His suit was perfect, his posture impeccable, his smile practiced and professional. He hadn't seen her yet. She could leave now, slip out before anyone noticed, preserve the careful distance she'd maintained for 5 years. But that would be running, and Ashley Campbell didn't run anymore. "Mommy, I'm hungry." Bellamy's voice pulled her back to the present. He was looking up at her with those gray-green eyes, already bored with the spectacle of adults socializing. "There's food over there." She pointed toward a buffet table laden with the kind of appetizers that cost more per piece than a reasonable lunch. "Let's get you something to eat." They made their way through the crowd, Ashley keeping her children close and her expression neutral. She greeted people she knew with the appropriate level of warmth, accepted compliments on her work with gracious professionalism, and kept moving steadily toward the side of the room that was furthest from Charles Brooks. It almost worked. "Mrs. Campbell," David Hartwell's voice cut through her strategic retreat. "I was hoping I'd find you here." David was the developer she'd been working with on the Riverside Heights project. He was the reason she'd accepted this invitation in the first place, the reason she'd convinced herself that the professional benefits outweighed the personal risks. Mr. Hartwell. Ashley extended her hand with a smile that she hoped looked more genuine than it felt. Lovely event, isn't it? Made lovelier by your presence. And who are these charming individuals? Bellamy straightened his spine with the seriousness of someone being presented at a formal court. I'm Bellamy Campbell. This is my sister Bella. We're twins, but I'm 7 minutes older, which means I'm in charge. You are not in charge. Bella's correction was immediate and indignant. Mommy's in charge. You just think you're in charge because you read more books. David laughed with the genuine delight of someone who didn't encounter many children in his professional life. They're wonderful, Ashley. You must be so proud. Every single day. The conversation shifted to business then, timelines and material selections and the usual dance of commerce dressed in evening wear. Ashley allowed herself to relax slightly, falling into the familiar rhythm of professional discourse. This was territory she understood. This was ground she'd earned. She didn't notice the approach until it was too late. David, I didn't expect to see you tonight. Aren't you still recovering from that golf injury? The voice hit Ashley like a physical force, low and smooth, with undertones of whiskey and authority, exactly the same as she remembered and completely different because now it was coming from someone she'd trained herself to forget. Charles Brooks stepped into her peripheral vision, his attention apparently focused on David, his body language suggesting he hadn't yet registered who else was standing there. But Ashley knew him, had known him well enough once to read the micro-expressions that crossed his face, the slight tension in his shoulders that said he was aware of something unexpected in his environment, even if his conscious mind hadn't caught up yet. David launched into a story about his golf swing that Ashley didn't hear. She was too busy preparing herself for the moment that was coming, the collision that had been inevitable from the second she'd opened that invitation. Then it happened. Charles's gaze shifted from David to the woman standing beside him, and the world stopped. She watched recognition dawn on his face like a slow-motion disaster. Confusion first, then shock, then something that looked almost like pain. His composure cracked in ways she'd never seen from him before, the professional mask slipping to reveal something raw and unguarded underneath. Ashley. His voice broke on her name. Charles. Hers didn't. It's been a while. She watched him struggle to regain control, watched him try to reconstruct the walls that her presence had somehow demolished. He looked older than she remembered, but that wasn't surprising. 5 years would age anyone. What surprised her was how tired he looked underneath the polish, how empty despite all the evidence of success surrounding him. What are you? He stopped, started again. I didn't know you'd be here. It's a public event. I run a design firm. Occasionally we attend public events. Of course you do. His eyes dropped to the children beside her, and Ashley saw the moment understanding began to dawn. She saw his gaze track from Bellamy's face to Bella's and back again. She saw him register the gray-green eyes, the shape of their features, the unmistakable echoes of his own genetics reflected back at him in miniature. These are... He couldn't finish the sentence. My children. Ashley kept her voice level. Bellamy and Bella. Twins. They'll be 5 in March. She watched him do the math, watched his face go pale as he counted backward. 5 in March meant conception roughly 9 months before that. Their divorce had been finalized in May, 5 years ago. The timeline was damning and irrefutable. They're mine. It wasn't a question. It was a realization that was rewriting everything he thought he knew about the past 5 years. Before Ashley could respond, Bellamy stepped forward with the fearless directness that she'd both encouraged and dreaded. Who are you? You're making my mommy's face do that thing it does when she's pretending not to be upset. Charles looked at this small person who had his eyes and his intensity and something else, something indefinable that made Ashley's heart ache every time she saw it. He looked like a man drowning in revelations he couldn't process fast enough. He stopped, looked at Ashley with something like desperation. Can I tell them? The question surprised her. She'd expected him to take charge, to make declarations, to assert his rights in the way he'd always asserted his rights to everything he wanted. Instead, he was asking permission, waiting for her approval before saying anything to the children who were watching this exchange with undisguised curiosity. Yes, she said quietly. You can tell them. Charles turned back to the twins and lowered himself to their level, moving slowly like someone approaching something fragile and precious. My name is Charles. I knew your mother a long time ago, before you were born. And He paused, visibly struggling. I'm your father. I didn't know you existed until right now, which means I missed the first 4 years of your lives. And I'm more sorry about that than I know how to explain. Bellamy processed this with the analytical attention of a scientist examining evidence. If you're our father, why didn't you know about us? That's complicated. Adults always say things are complicated when they don't want to explain. Bellamy's tone carried an edge of disapproval. I'm almost 5. I'm not stupid. You're absolutely right. Charles looked genuinely impressed, despite the impossible circumstances. You deserve a real answer. The truth is, your mom and I had a relationship that ended badly. When she found out she was pregnant, she made the decision not to tell me. That was her choice to make, and I understand why she made it, even though I wish things had been different. Ashley felt something shift in her chest at the diplomacy of his answer. He wasn't blaming her, wasn't making himself the victim, wasn't using this moment to score points with the children. It was the kind of measured response she wouldn't have expected from the Charles she remembered. But people could perform for an audience. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. The relationship ended badly because he chose someone else, she clarified, keeping her voice neutral. I left because staying would have been too painful. I built our life in Denver without his help or knowledge. Those are the facts. So you were mean to Mommy? Bella's question was directed at Charles with the unfiltered judgment of childhood. Yes. Charles didn't hesitate. I was selfish and careless with her feelings. I hurt her badly. That's not her perception or opinion. It's fact. And I've regretted it every day since. The honesty of the admission seemed to satisfy something in Bella's assessment. She nodded slowly, then returned her attention to more pressing concerns. If you're our dad, are you going to be in our life now? Or are you going to go away again? I want to be in your life. Very much. If you'll let me try. We'll think about it. Bella delivered this verdict with the gravity of someone making a corporate decision. Then she tugged on Ashley's hand with the impatience of a child who had moved on to other priorities. Mommy, can we get cake now? In a few minutes, baby. David Hartwell had apparently remembered a pressing engagement on the other side of the room, because when Ashley looked up, he was gone. Smart man. This was not a conversation anyone wanted to witness. We need to talk, Charles said quietly. Not here. Somewhere private. There's a terrace through those doors. Ashley nodded toward an exit. We can talk there, but briefly. The children are tired, and I won't let you upset them. You would never intentionally upset anyone. That was always your problem, Charles. You never intended to hurt people. You just never prioritized them enough to avoid it. She walked toward the terrace without waiting for a response, the twins' hands in hers. Charles followed, his usual confident stride reduced to something more uncertain. The terrace overlooked the city, a glittering expanse of lights that made the urban landscape look almost magical. The November air was cold enough to cut through the warmth of the ballroom, and Ashley was grateful for the chill. It kept her focused, kept her sharp. She positioned herself near the railing and gestured for the twins to sit on a nearby stone bench. Stay here, okay? The grown-ups need to talk for a minute. Here. She pulled tablets from her bag and handed one to each child. Play your games. We won't be long. Are we in trouble? Bellamy asked. No, baby, not at all. Just sit quietly and play. I promise we'll get cake soon. The twins seemed satisfied with this arrangement, settling onto the bench and immediately becoming absorbed in their screens. Ashley made a mental note to feel guilty about screen time later, when she wasn't navigating the most emotionally complex conversation of her life. She turned to face Charles, who was standing a few feet away looking like a man who'd just had his entire world restructured without his consent. How? He started, then stopped. Tried again. 5 years, Ashley. 5 years. Why didn't you tell me? You want to have that conversation now? Here? She gestured toward the twins, who were determinedly not listening while obviously absorbing every word. Because I can give you the answer, but it won't be pretty. Yes. I need to understand. Ashley took a breath that had nothing to do with oxygen and everything to do with armor. I found out I was pregnant 2 days after the divorce was finalized. 2 days after I signed papers ending our marriage because you couldn't be bothered to fight for it. You were already in Singapore, setting up your expansion project, being the visionary CEO who is going to conquer new markets. I spent about 72 hours deciding what to do. And you decided not to tell me. I decided that telling you wouldn't change anything." She kept her voice level, but there was steel underneath. "I remembered the last year of our marriage, Charles. I remembered every dinner you missed, every vacation you postponed, every time I asked you to be present and you chose your company instead. I remembered you suggesting that maybe we wanted different things, like my desire for a partner who actually showed up was some kind of unreasonable demand. That's not. Let me finish." Ashley's tone brooked no argument. "I realized that even if I told you about the pregnancy, nothing would actually change. You'd feel obligated, maybe. You'd set up some kind of financial arrangement, probably. But you wouldn't be present. You'd be exactly what you always were. A man who prioritized work over people. A man who treated relationships as things to schedule around more important meetings." Charles was silent, his face pale in the ambient light from the ballroom. "So, I made a choice," Ashley continued. "I chose to protect my children from that, from disappointment, from being made to feel like an inconvenience, from watching their father consistently choose something else over them, the way I watched him choose it over me. You made that choice for them without giving me a chance to prove you wrong. I made that choice based on 3 years of evidence about who you were." Ashley's voice hardened. "I made it to protect them. I'd make it again." Charles absorbed this in silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I've changed. People always say that. I know how meaningless those words sound coming from me. I know I have no right to ask you to believe them. But Ashley," he moved closer, not crowding her, but closing some of the distance between them. "I spent the first year after you left telling myself I was fine, that the divorce was mutual, that we'd simply wanted different things, like I told you. Then I spent the second year realizing I was lying to myself, and I've spent the 3 years since then trying to become someone better. Pretty words, but I've heard your pretty words before. I've been in therapy." Charles said it simply, without drama, twice a week for 3 years, learning why I prioritized the way I did, learning what I was running from, learning that achievement isn't the same as fulfillment and success isn't the same as happiness. Ashley studied his face, looking for signs of performance, for the telltale indicators of manipulation she'd learned to recognize in those final months of their marriage. She didn't find them. What she found instead was something that looked uncomfortably like genuine pain. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," Charles continued. "I'm not asking for another chance with you. I know I don't deserve that, and I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted to see me again. But those children—" He glanced at the twins, who had abandoned all pretense of playing games and were watching the adults with undisguised attention. "They're mine too, and I'd like the chance to know them, to be present for whatever comes next, to prove through actions that I can be the father they deserve. And if I say no, then I'll respect your decision. I'll have my lawyers draw up whatever financial arrangements are appropriate, and I'll stay away. But I'm asking you, Ashley, please, give me a chance to show you I've changed." The silence stretched between them, filled with 5 years of absence and the weight of decisions that couldn't be unmade. "One dinner," Ashley said finally. "This weekend. Somewhere casual and child-friendly. We'll see how it goes. If the twins are comfortable, if you actually show up as a person rather than a CEO on a publicity tour, we can discuss next steps." "Thank you." The relief in his voice was palpable. "Thank you, Ashley. I won't waste this chance. See that you don't." She turned to collect the twins, then paused. "One more thing. If you commit to this, you commit completely. You don't get to decide 6 months from now that fatherhood is inconvenient. You don't get to let them down the way you let me down. These are children, Charles, not a project you can delegate when you get bored. I understand. I hope you do. Because if you hurt them, if you disappear on them, if you make them feel like an afterthought the way you made me feel, you'll never get another chance. I'll make sure of it." She gathered the children and walked away without looking back. But as she crossed through the ballroom, heading for the exit, she caught a glimpse of Charles still standing on the terrace. He was staring at nothing, his hands braced against the railing, his shoulders shaking with what might have been sobs. Good, she thought. Let him feel something for once. But there was another part of her, a part she'd spent 5 years burying, that felt something else entirely. Something that wasn't satisfaction or vindication, something that might have been hope. And that scared her more than anything else about this entire impossible evening. The drive back to Ashley's hotel felt like it lasted hours. The twins were wired from the excitement of the evening, full of questions about the tall man who said he was their father, and Ashley answered them as honestly as she could while also trying to navigate city traffic she wasn't familiar with. "Mommy, is he nice?" Bella's question came from the back seat, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she was processing something important. "I don't know yet," Ashley answered honestly. "What do you think?" "I think he seems sad, like he lost something important." "He did." Bellamy's voice was certain. "He lost us for 6 years. That's a lot of losing." Ashley felt her throat tighten at the simple, devastating accuracy of her son's observation. Sometimes children saw more clearly than adults ever could. "It was almost 5 years, baby. Not 6. That's still a lot." "Yes, it is." "Is he going to try to take us away from you?" Bellamy asked, and the fear in his voice cut through Ashley like a knife. "No, sweetheart." She made her voice as steady and reassuring as she could. "No one is taking you anywhere. You're my children. You live with me. Nothing about that is going to change. But he's our dad. Biologically, yes. But being a parent is about more than biology. It's about showing up, about being there, about doing the work every single day. He hasn't done any of that work yet. He's going to have to earn the right to be part of your lives. How does someone earn that? By being consistent, by keeping promises, by putting you first, even when it's hard. Did he not put you first when you were married?" The question was too perceptive, and Ashley took a moment before answering. "No," she said quietly. "He didn't. That's why we got divorced." "So, why are you giving him a chance now?" Ashley considered the question as she pulled into the hotel parking lot. It was a fair question, one she'd been asking herself since the moment she'd agreed to that dinner. "Because people can change," she said finally. "Not everyone does, and not everyone who says they've changed actually has. But it's possible. And if there's even a chance that he could be a good father to you, I owe it to you to find out. But you're going to be careful. Very careful. I'm not going to let anyone hurt you. Not ever." "Good." Bellamy's voice carried approval. "I don't want to be hurt." Ashley parked the car and turned to look at her children, these 2 small humans she'd built a life around, who carried pieces of both their parents while being entirely their own people. "Listen to me," she said, "both of you. Whatever happens with Charles, whatever we decide about him being in your lives, one thing will never change. I am your mother. I will always protect you. And no one, no matter who they are or what rights they claim, will ever be allowed to make you feel less than perfectly loved and wanted. Do you understand?" "We understand," Bella said. "Can we get room service now? You promised cake, and we never got cake." Despite everything, despite the emotional earthquake of the past few hours, Ashley laughed. "Yes," she said, "we can get room service. All the cake you want. Now, before I continue with what happened next, before I tell you about that first dinner and everything that came after, I need to pause and speak directly to you. If you're still here, if you've made it this far into this story, it means something about Ashley and Charles is resonating with you. Maybe you've been betrayed by someone you loved. Maybe you've been the one who made the mistake. Maybe you're trying to figure out if broken things can ever really be fixed. This story isn't a fairy tale. It's messy and complicated and honest about the work it takes to rebuild trust after it's been destroyed. And if that's speaking to you, if you want to see whether Charles can actually prove himself, or whether Ashley's walls are going to stay standing forever, I need you to do something. Hit that like button right now. Share this with someone who needs to hear that survival is possible, that our worst moments don't have to define our entire story. And subscribe if you haven't already, because this is just the beginning. Trust me when I tell you that you don't want to miss what happens next. Now, let's talk about that first dinner. The pizza restaurant Bellamy and Bella loved was exactly the kind of place Charles Brooks probably never frequented. Red checkered tablecloths, paper menus with crayons scattered across them for children to draw on. The cheerful chaos of families navigating Saturday afternoon dining with a particular combination of exhaustion and determination that parents everywhere knew intimately. Charles arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in jeans and a sweater that still probably cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget, but at least suggested he understood the assignment. He was pacing near the entrance when Ashley pulled into the parking lot, and she watched him for a moment before getting out of the car. He looked nervous, genuinely nervous, in a way she'd never seen from him during their marriage. The Charles she'd known had been confident to the point of arrogance, certain that every situation would bend to his will if he just applied enough pressure. This Charles was standing outside a pizza restaurant looking like he might throw up. Is that him? Bella pressed her face against the car window. He looked scared. Good, Ashley thought. He should be scared. Remember what we talked about, she said instead. Be polite. Answer questions if you want to. And if you feel uncomfortable at any point, you tell me and we leave. Okay? Okay. Both twins agreed. They got out of the car and crossed the parking lot. Charles spotted them immediately, and his whole face transformed into a smile that made him look younger, less guarded, more like the man Ashley had fallen in love with a lifetime ago. She crushed that thought before it could take root. Hi, Charles greeted them, his voice slightly too bright with the effort of appearing calm. Thank you for coming. I found this place online, and the reviews mentioned they had great pizza and a really good coloring station for kids. We know this place, Bella informed him with the confidence of an expert. We come here all the time. The pepperoni is the best. I'll have to try it. They went inside and got a booth, the twins on one side and Ashley and Charles on the other. The arrangement felt strange, too much like a family outing when they weren't a family, but Ashley couldn't figure out a better configuration that wouldn't seem hostile. The first few minutes were awkward. Charles asked questions about school and hobbies, and the twins answered with the particular guardedness of children who weren't sure what this situation was or what was expected of them. Then Bellamy mentioned bridges. We learned about them in my science class. He was drawing on his paper menu, sketching what looked like a suspension bridge with surprising accuracy. I like how they work, how they stay up even when they're carrying heavy things. Something in Charles's posture shifted. Relaxed. I studied engineering in college, he said. Before I switched to business. The physics of bridges is fascinating. Load distribution, tension and compression, the way forces transfer through different materials. Bellamy's eyes lit up with the recognition of finding someone who spoke his language. Do you know about cantilevers? I do. They're architectural elements that project horizontally into space, supported only on one end. That's exactly right. Bellamy's voice carried approval. My teacher said most grown-ups don't know what cantilevers are. Most grown-ups didn't study structural engineering for 3 years before realizing they wanted to run a company instead. And just like that, they were off. Charles and Bellamy dove into a discussion of engineering principles that left Bella rolling her eyes and Ashley watching with something she didn't want to name. Charles was engaging with Bellamy on his level, not talking down, not oversimplifying, not pretending interest while actually being bored. He was genuinely curious about what Bellamy knew, genuinely enthusiastic about sharing his own knowledge. This was the man she'd fallen in love with, the one who paid attention, the one who made people feel seen, the one who brought intelligence and interest to every interaction. She'd forgotten he could be like this, or maybe she'd forced herself to forget, because remembering made the betrayal hurt worse. Bella, feeling left out of the engineering discussion, tugged on Ashley's sleeve. Boys are boring, she whispered loudly. They just want to talk about buildings. Ashley suppressed a smile. Your brother is interested in different things than you. That's okay, I know, but still, boring. Bella returned to her drawing, which appeared to be a dragon wearing a crown. This is Queen Dragonfire. She protects the castle from people who hurt her friends. That's beautiful, baby. Charles looked up from his conversation with Bellamy. Can I see? The question was directed at Bella, who considered it with a careful evaluation of a gallery owner assessing a potential buyer. I guess. She held up her paper menu drawing. This is Queen Dragonfire. She's a dragon who breathes purple fire because purple is the best color. She lives in a castle and she protects everyone who's nice. She looks very fierce. She is. Bella's voice carried satisfaction. She doesn't let anyone hurt the people she loves. Something crossed Charles's face at that. Something that looked like understanding, or possibly shame. That's a very important job, he said quietly. Protecting people you love. I know. That's why I drew her. The pizza arrived, and conversation shifted to the safer territory of food preferences and whether pineapple belonged on pizza, a debate that Bella felt strongly about and Bellamy considered settled science in the negative. By the time they finished eating, something had shifted. The twins were laughing at something Charles had said about his college roommate's disastrous cooking experiments. The tension in Ashley's shoulders had eased slightly. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was the absence of immediate hostility. Progress, she supposed. As they prepared to leave, Charles crouched down to the twins' level. I had a really good time today, he said. Thank you for letting me have pizza with you. You're okay, Bella allowed. For someone we just met. Can I see you again? In 2 weeks, maybe. We could do something fun. Bellamy considered this with the seriousness of a boardroom decision. What kind of fun? Whatever you want. There's a natural history museum here that has an exhibit on architectural history, and a butterfly pavilion where you can walk around with butterflies. Bella's eyes went wide. Real butterflies? That you can touch? That you can stand still and hope they land on you? Yes, I want to do that. Then, we'll do that. Both things. Museum and butterflies. Bella looked at Ashley for confirmation. Ashley found herself nodding before she'd fully decided to. If he shows up, she said carefully. If he's consistent, then we can do the museum and butterflies. I'll show up, Charles promised. I'll be here in 2 weeks. I'll call you this week to confirm. We'll see. Ashley gathered her children and walked them to the car, feeling Charles's eyes on her back the entire way. She didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge him, but as she buckled the twins into their seats, she caught herself thinking that maybe, possibly, this wasn't a complete disaster. Maybe. That night, after the twins were asleep and Ashley was sitting in her hotel room staring at nothing, her phone buzzed with a text. Thank you for today. I meant everything I said. I won't waste this chance. She stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Actions, not words. See you in 2 weeks. Short, professional, giving nothing away. Exactly as it should be. But as she lay in bed trying to sleep, her mind kept replaying moments from the dinner. The way Charles had engaged with Bellamy about engineering, the genuine interest in his voice when he asked Bella about her drawing, the look on his face when Bella had talked about protecting people you love. This was the man she loved once, the man she'd thought she'd spend her life with before everything fell apart. But that was ancient history. What mattered now was the future, specifically whether Charles could sustain his commitment, or whether this was just another emotional impulse that would fade when faced with the boring reality of actual parenting. Time would tell. It always did. She finally fell asleep around 2 a.m, exhausted from emotional labor and the particular weight of hoping for something she'd trained herself to stop hoping for years ago. She dreamed of dragons and skyscrapers, of children who built kingdoms where broken things could be made whole again if you just had the right blueprint and enough patience to do the work. And somewhere in Seattle, in a penthouse that had never felt emptier than it did tonight, Charles Brooks sat in his home office staring at photos he'd taken that afternoon. Bellamy explaining bridge physics with animated hand gestures. Bella holding up her dragon, drawing with pride. Both of them laughing at something he'd said, their faces open and unguarded in a way that made his chest ache. He had children, twins who were brilliant and fierce and absolutely perfect, and he'd missed everything. Every first word, every first step, every birthday and holiday and ordinary Tuesday. He'd been building an empire while they were learning to walk and talk and become these incredible small humans who looked at the world with his eyes and their mother's determination. He couldn't fix the past, but he could show up for the future. Starting in 2 weeks. Starting with keeping every promise he made, no matter how small. Starting with becoming someone worthy of being called their father. For the first time in 5 years, Charles Brooks felt something that wasn't emptiness or regret. He felt hope. The 2 weeks between that first dinner and the promised museum visit felt like a test Ashley hadn't studied for. She went through her normal routines, running her design firm, managing her team, overseeing the Riverside Heights project that had brought her to that charity gala in the first place. She helped the twins with homework and read bedtime stories and made breakfast every morning like nothing in their world had fundamentally shifted. But something had shifted. She could feel it in the way Bellamy asked questions about structural engineering that went beyond what his science class covered, in the way Bella drew dragons protecting castles with increasing frequency and detail, in the way both children asked with careful casualness whether Charles had called yet. He called on Wednesday. Ashley almost didn't answer. She'd been in a meeting with a difficult client, her phone buzzing insistently in her bag, and by the time she saw the Seattle area code, she'd already decided to let it go to voicemail. But then she thought about how she'd feel if she were the one waiting, hoping, trying to prove something to someone who'd already decided she would fail. She excused herself from the meeting and stepped into the hallway. "Hello, Ashley." His voice carried relief so obvious it almost made her uncomfortable. "Thank you for picking up. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. I know. I don't have any right to expect you to answer my calls, but I wanted to." He paused. "I wanted to confirm Saturday. The museum and the butterfly pavilion. I've already booked a flight and I found a hotel near your place. I can meet you wherever is most convenient. You're really coming. I told you I would. People say a lot of things. I know. There was something in his voice that sounded like acceptance rather than defensiveness. I know my words don't mean much after everything. That's why I'm calling to confirm, and why I'll show up on Saturday, and why I'll keep showing up until you believe that I mean what I say. Ashley leaned against the hallway wall, watching her assistant hover uncertainly near the conference room door. The twins have been asking about you. They have? Bellamy wants to know if you've ever built a real bridge. Bella wants to know if you have any pets because she thinks you should get a fish. I haven't built a real bridge, but I've funded the construction of 3. And I don't have pets because I travel too much. But, Charles hesitated, maybe that's something I should reconsider. Don't make promises you can't keep. I'm just saying maybe. Maybe is allowed, isn't it? Maybe is allowed. The silence stretched between them, filled with things neither of them knew how to say. Can I talk to them? Charles asked. The twins. Before Saturday. I thought maybe a video call, if that's okay with you. Just to say hi. So Saturday isn't the only time I'm reaching out. Ashley considered it. The request was reasonable. More than reasonable, actually. It showed forethought, the understanding that consistency mattered more than grand gestures. 15 minutes, she said. Age-appropriate conversation only. And I reserve the right to end the call if it seems like it's upsetting them. Of course, whatever boundaries you set, I'll respect them. Tonight at 7, Denver time. I'll be there. Thank you, Ashley, for giving me this chance, for letting me try. Don't thank me yet. This is about them, not about you and me. I understand. She hung up without saying goodbye and returned to her meeting, but her mind was elsewhere for the rest of the afternoon. The first video call was awkward. Charles appeared on the screen looking slightly desperate, his background revealing what looked like a home office with floor-to-ceiling windows and the kind of minimalist design that suggested either excellent taste or an expensive interior decorator. "Hi," he said, then seemed to realize how inadequate that was. Hello. It's good to see you both." Bella waved with enthusiasm. Bellamy studied the screen with analytical attention. "Your office is very clean," Bellamy observed. "Mommy's office has papers everywhere. Different organizational styles," Ashley murmured from her position just out of frame. She was close enough to monitor but far enough to give the children space to have their own conversation. "I have a lot of assistants who keep things organized for me," Charles admitted. "If left to my own devices, there would probably be papers everywhere too." "What's an assistant?" "Someone who helps with tasks, like scheduling and organizing and reminding me of things I need to do." Bella considered this. "Like a helper. Exactly like a helper. Do you have a lot of helpers?" "Quite a few. Running a company requires a lot of coordination. What's your company do?" Charles launched into a surprisingly accessible explanation of technology development that somehow involved comparisons to building blocks and puzzle pieces. Bellamy's eyes lit up at the technical aspects. Bella lost interest after about 2 minutes and asked if she could show him her dragon drawings. The call ran over the 15-minute limit by 7 minutes before Ashley gently intervened. "Time to wrap up," she said, leaning into frame. "Someone has a bath and then bed. Already?" Bella protested. "We were just getting to the good dragons. You can show him more next time." "There's going to be a next time?" Bellamy asked, and Ashley could hear the hope he was trying to hide. "If everyone wants there to be," she said carefully. "And if Charles keeps showing up." "I'll keep showing up," Charles promised. "Same time tomorrow, if that's okay. Or whenever works for your schedule." "Tomorrow at 7, Ashley agreed before she could talk herself out of it. The calls became a pattern. Every evening at 7 Denver time, Charles appeared on screen. He remembered things from previous conversations, asked follow-up questions, treated the children's interests with genuine respect rather than the tolerant condescension so many adults showed toward children's concerns. By the third call, Bellamy was showing him elaborate blueprints he'd drawn for imaginary buildings. "This one has cantilevers on every floor," Bellamy explained, holding up a paper covered in careful pencil lines. "See how they extend outward? It creates more usable space without needing more foundation." "That's brilliant," Charles said, and he sounded like he meant it. "Have you thought about how the internal supports would handle the additional weight?" Ashley watched from the kitchen, pretending to clean up after dinner while actually listening to every word. The engagement was real. Charles wasn't performing or checking boxes or putting in minimum effort. He was genuinely curious about what Bellamy was creating. By the fifth call, Bella had started singing him songs she learned at school. "This one is about a caterpillar that becomes a butterfly," she announced, then launched into an off-key but enthusiastic rendition that made Charles's face do something Ashley didn't want to examine too closely. "That was beautiful," he said when she finished. "You have a lovely voice." "I know." Bella accepted the compliment with the complete confidence of someone who had never learned to doubt herself. "Do you want to hear another one?" "I'd love to." The calls kept running over time. Ashley kept letting them. Saturday arrived faster than Ashley expected. She woke early, nervous in ways she didn't want to admit, and spent too long choosing an outfit that was casual enough to not seem like she was trying but put together enough to remind Charles that she'd done fine without him. The twins were vibrating with excitement by the time they finished breakfast. "Is he really going to take us to see butterflies?" Bella asked for the fourth time. "Real butterflies that fly around and land on you?" "That's the plan. And the museum with the buildings?" "And the museum. And he's really coming? He's not going to change his mind?" The question came from Bellamy, and there was something underneath it that made Ashley's heart hurt. Her son had learned to expect disappointment. He'd learned that promises from adults didn't always mean anything. That was on her, partly. On the life she'd built trying to protect them, which had also taught them that the world wasn't reliable. "He said he's coming," Ashley answered carefully. "We'll see if he keeps his word." Charles was waiting outside the Natural History Museum when they arrived. He dressed casually again, jeans and a pullover that probably still cost more than most people's car payments. But the effort was visible. He was trying. "You came," Bella said, running toward him with the fearless trust of a child who hadn't yet learned to guard her heart. Charles crouched down to catch her, and something in his face crumpled at the impact of her small body against his. "Of course I came. I promised, didn't I?" Bellamy approached more cautiously, hanging back to evaluate the situation. "You're early," he observed. "We weren't supposed to meet for another 10 minutes. "I know. I wanted to make sure I was here, in case you were early too." "Logical." Charles smiled at that, genuine and slightly overwhelmed. The museum was crowded with weekend families, but Bellamy navigated through the exhibits with single-minded purpose, dragging Charles toward the architectural history section while Bella and Ashley followed at a more leisurely pace. "He really likes him," Bella observed, watching her brother gesture animatedly, while Charles listened with apparent fascination. "It seems that way. Do you like him?" "It's complicated, baby. That's what adults always say when the answer is yes, but they don't want to admit it." Ashley found herself laughing despite everything. "When did you get so smart?" "I was born smart." Bella's voice carried absolute certainty. "Bellamy says we got it from you." They caught up to the boys. "Man and child," Ashley corrected herself, "at an exhibit about structural innovation in ancient architecture." Charles was explaining something about Roman aqueducts while Bellamy absorbed every word like he was learning the secrets of the universe. "This is the best day ever," Bellamy announced when they finally moved on to the next exhibit. "Dad knows everything about buildings." The word landed like an earthquake. Everyone froze. Ashley saw Charles's face go through several expressions in rapid succession. Shock, hope, terror, joy. "I don't know everything," Charles said carefully, his voice thick with emotion he was trying to contain. "But I'm happy to share what I do know." Ashley didn't correct the word. She filed it away for later examination, for processing when she wasn't standing in a museum surrounded by strangers watching her son casually call his father Dad for the first time. They spent 3 hours exploring the exhibits before heading to the butterfly pavilion. The contrast was striking, from the organized precision of architectural history to the controlled chaos of nature. Hundreds of butterflies floating through a climate-controlled habitat, landing on plants and handrails and the occasional delighted visitor. Bella was enchanted immediately. She stood very still in the center of the main pathway, arms outstretched, her face turned upward with an expression of perfect patience. "What is she doing?" Charles asked Ashley quietly. "Waiting. She's learned that butterflies come to you if you're patient enough." And they did. A monarch landed on Bella's outstretched hand first, then another on her shoulder. Within moments, she had 5 butterflies resting on her like she was a garden they'd been seeking. "Don't move," Ashley whispered, pulling out her phone. But Charles was faster. His phone was already out, capturing the moment from multiple angles. "This is incredible," he breathed. "She's like a butterfly magnet." "I'm a butterfly princess," Bella whispered, her voice filled with wonder. They chose me. Bellamy stood nearby, watching his sister with a mixture of envy and admiration. How do you do that? You have to be very still and think beautiful thoughts. That's ridiculous. Bellamy's skepticism was evident. Butterflies don't respond to thoughts, but he tried it anyway. Standing perfectly still, presumably thinking whatever he considered beautiful thoughts, probably involving cantilevers and load-bearing walls. A small blue butterfly landed on his nose. I got one, he yelped, then immediately regretted the noise as the butterfly flew away. I scared it. You'll get another chance, Charles assured him. Here, stand next to me. We'll be still together. They stood side by side, father and son, waiting for butterflies. And watching them, Ashley felt something in her chest crack. Not break, but crack in the way ice does when spring comes, making room for something new to emerge. This was what she'd wanted for them. A father who showed up, who participated, who made ordinary moments special just by being present. But it was also dangerous, because the more Charles proved himself, the more she'd have to confront her own walls, ask herself whether they were still protection or had become their own kind of prison. After the butterfly pavilion, they stopped for ice cream despite the November chill. The twins debated flavors with the gravity of people making life-altering decisions, while Charles and Ashley stood slightly apart, watching. Thank you for today, Charles said quietly. For letting me be part of this. You did well. Ashley heard herself admitting it before she could stop herself. They're happy. That's what matters. Can I ask you something? Not about them. About you. That depends on the question. Are you happy? Beyond being a mother, beyond your success, beyond everything you've built. Are you happy? The question caught her off guard. It cut through small talk to something more vulnerable than she was prepared to handle in an ice cream shop. I'm content, she replied carefully. I have work that matters. Children I love. A life I built from nothing. That's more than most people get. Content isn't happy. Maybe not. But it's stable. And after 5 years of fighting for stability, I'll take it over the chaos of chasing happiness. Charles absorbed this with visible sadness. I did that to you. Made you choose survival over joy. You were part of it. But I made my own choices. I chose to leave. To start over. To build something that couldn't be taken from me. Those were my decisions, and I don't regret them. Even if they cost you happiness? Happiness is overrated. It's a feeling that comes and goes. Stability is what keeps you alive when feelings fail. The twins returned before Charles could respond, ice cream cones in hand, arguments already beginning about whose flavor was superior. The day ended back at Ashley's hotel, the twins exhausted and happy in ways that made Ashley's heart ache with complicated emotions. Can I see them again? Charles asked as they stood in the parking lot, the twins already buckled into the car and fighting sleep. Before I fly back, maybe lunch tomorrow? Ashley considered it. She'd planned to maintain distance, keep his visits controlled and limited. But the twins had been so happy today, and Charles had been genuinely present in a way that suggested this wasn't just novelty. Noon, she agreed. There's a park near here with a good playground. We'll meet you there. Thank you. He hesitated at the car door. Ashley, I know I have years of trust to rebuild. I know one good day doesn't erase 5 years of absence. But I want you to know I'm serious about this. About them. I'm not going anywhere. Time will tell. It always does. She drove away without looking back. But she saw in her rearview mirror that Charles remained standing in the parking lot, watching until her car disappeared around the corner. That night, after the twins were asleep, Ashley stood in her hotel room window staring at the city lights and trying to understand what she was feeling. She'd done it. Navigated the first real visit. Watched Charles be present in ways she hadn't expected. Seen her children light up at a tension they hadn't known they were missing. She should feel relieved, accomplished, satisfied that she'd handled a difficult situation with grace and appropriate boundaries. Instead, she felt something else entirely, something that might have been hope, not for herself. She'd sealed that door 5 years ago and thrown away the key. But hope that maybe, possibly, her children could have a father who showed up, who stayed, who proved that people could change. She'd believe it when she saw it. Until then, the walls stayed up, the boundaries remained firm, and she would continue being exactly what she'd learned to be, complete unto herself, needing no one, surviving everything. The weeks turned into months. Charles kept his word. He visited Denver twice a month, every visit more comfortable than the last. He video called the twins 3 times a week, conversations that grew longer and more natural as everyone relaxed into this new dynamic. He sent thoughtful gifts for occasions. Never excessive, always meaningful. Things that showed he paid attention to their interests rather than just writing checks. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Ashley's walls began to crack. It started small. She'd catch herself smiling at something Charles said during a video call. She'd find herself looking forward to his visits, not just for the twins, but because his presence had become comfortable, familiar in a way that didn't hurt anymore. She noticed how he'd changed, more patient than the man she remembered, more present, more willing to be vulnerable than the person she'd married who'd treated emotion like a liability to be managed. 4 months after that charity gala, Charles made an announcement. They were having dinner at Ashley's apartment, something that had become routine. Charles cooking while Ashley supervised homework. Everyone pretending this was completely normal, rather than the complicated reconstruction of something that had never existed in the first place. "I have some news," Charles said as they sat down to eat. "I've been restructuring my company, delegating more responsibilities to my executive team." "That sounds significant," Ashley observed, keeping her voice neutral. "It is." He met her eyes across the table. "I've decided to open a Denver office for Brooks Technologies. It'll be small at first, just a satellite location, but it means I can spend more time here, 3 weeks out of every month instead of just weekends." The twins erupted into cheers. Bella abandoned her dinner to throw herself at Charles. Bellamy's face split into a grin that Ashley rarely saw outside of engineering discussions. "You're going to live here?" Bella demanded. "Really live here? Close to us?" "Close to you. I found a house in Wash Park, about 3 miles from here. I'm hoping to move in within 2 months. Ashley felt her heart rate increase. Whether from excitement or panic, she couldn't quite determine. "That's a big change," she said carefully. "It's the right change." Charles's voice was steady, certain. "I've been thinking about it since that first day in my office when I saw them for the first time. My company can function without me micromanaging every decision. But Bellamy and Bella." He looked at the twins with an expression that made something in Ashley's chest tighten. "They're only 4 once, almost 5. I don't want to miss any more of their lives than I already have. What about your life in Seattle? Your friends, your routine, everything you've built there?" "I didn't have much of a life in Seattle." Charles's honesty was unflinching. "Just work. The few friends I had were really business associates who've mostly fallen away since I started traveling here so much. There's nothing tying me to Seattle except inertia and habit. Here, I have my children. That's everything." It was exactly the right answer, exactly what Ashley had hoped to hear, and it terrified her completely, because if Charles relocated to Denver, if he became a permanent fixture in their daily lives, the careful distance she'd maintained would become impossible to sustain. She'd have to actually deal with her feelings instead of compartmentalizing them into monthly visits she could control. When would this happen? She heard herself asking. "I'm looking at properties now, hoping to be settled within 2 months. I wanted to tell you first, make sure it was okay. You don't need my permission to move to Denver. It's a free country. No, but I need you to be comfortable with it. If this is too much too fast, I can slow down the timeline." Ashley looked at the twins, who were watching this exchange with barely contained excitement. She looked at Charles, who'd spent 4 months proving himself reliable and consistent. She looked at the life she'd built that suddenly felt less like protection and more like limitation. "Do it," she said. "Move here. Be close to them. They deserve that." What she didn't say, what she barely admitted to herself, was that maybe she deserved it too. Maybe she deserved to see what happened when someone who'd hurt her actually did the work to become better. Maybe she deserved the possibility of something more than just content survival. Now I need to pause here and speak directly to you. We're at a turning point in this story. Charles isn't just talking about change anymore. He's restructuring his entire life to be close to his children. He's choosing presence over convenience, family over empire. But here's the question I want you to think about. Is Ashley ready for this? Can she let her guard down enough to see who Charles has become? Or will the walls she built to survive become the prison that keeps her from living? If you're feeling this, if you're invested in what happens next, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me what you think Ashley should do. And share this with someone who needs to believe that broken things can be rebuilt, that people can actually change, that survival doesn't have to be the end of the story. Subscribe if you haven't already, because what happens next is going to challenge everything you think you know about forgiveness and second chances. Now, let's continue. That night after Charles left and the twins were finally asleep, Ashley stood in her kitchen drinking tea that had gone cold and staring at nothing. Margot found her there 20 minutes later. Margot was her business partner and closest friend, the person who'd been there through the divorce and the pregnancy and the years of building something from nothing. She had a key to Ashley's apartment and an open invitation to use it whenever she wanted. "You're thinking very loudly," Margot observed, pouring herself tea and settling at the kitchen table. "Want to share, or should I just guess?" "He's moving here." Ashley's voice sounded distant even to her own ears. "Opening a Denver office. He'll be here 3 weeks out of every month." "And how do you feel about that?" "I don't know. Terrified. Hopeful. Both simultaneously." "Terrified of what?" Ashley was quiet for a long moment. "He's been everything I hoped he'd be as a father. Consistent. Present. Genuinely engaged. The twins adore him. That sounds like good news." "It is good news. But it means I can't keep him at arm's length anymore. I can't pretend this is just about co-parenting when he's going to be a permanent fixture in our daily lives. I'm going to have to actually examine what I feel about him, beyond whether he's good for the children." Margot's expression was carefully neutral. "And what do you feel about him?" "I don't hate him anymore. That's progress. I did hate him. For a long time. But watching him with Bellamy and Bella, seeing how he's changed, how he prioritizes them over everything else. It's hard to maintain hatred in the face of genuine transformation." "That's not what I asked." "I know what you asked." Ashley finally sat down across from her friend. "I'm just not ready to answer it honestly. Because the answer scares you. Because the answer means I might have to risk something I swore I'd never risk again. My heart, my trust, my belief that people can choose me and stay chosen. He broke all of that 5 years ago. What if he breaks it again? What if he doesn't?" The question hung in the air between them. What if he's actually become the man you needed him to be back then? Margot continued. "Are you going to punish him forever for who he was, or give him credit for who he's become?" "I don't know if I can do it." Ashley's voice dropped to a whisper. "I don't know if I can be that vulnerable again. You don't have to decide tonight, but eventually you'll have to decide something. Living in this limbo, not moving forward, not letting go. That's just another kind of prison. You survived what he did to you. You built an empire from nothing. You raised 2 incredible children alone. You're strong enough to risk your heart again if you choose to. The question is whether you're brave enough." The words settled over Ashley like a challenge. She'd thought surviving was the brave part, enduring and rebuilding and raising children alone while building a business from scratch. Those were the hard things. Those were the things that required courage, but maybe staying safe was actually the coward's choice. Maybe real courage meant risking pain for the possibility of something better than mere contentment. She didn't sleep well that night. 6 weeks later, Charles closed on a house in Wash Park. It was a craftsman-style home, with enough bedrooms for everyone, and a backyard that was already making Ashley nervous about the outdoor adventures the twins would inevitably demand. Charles invited them for a walkthrough before he moved in. He wanted the twins to feel comfortable in what would become their second home. "This will be your room when you stay over," Charles told Bellamy, revealing a bedroom with built-in bookshelves and a desk positioned to catch morning light. "I thought you could use it for your architecture projects." Bellamy's eyes went wide. "This is mine? Really mine? Really yours? We'll decorate it however you want." Bella's room was painted lavender with space for her growing dragon collection and a window seat perfect for reading. "I love it," she breathed. "Can we stay tonight?" "Not tonight," Ashley interjected gently. "Your dad doesn't even have furniture yet, but soon." The word dad came out naturally now. Ashley had stopped flinching at it months ago. They explored the rest of the house together. A home office where Charles would work, a modern kitchen that opened to the backyard, a living room with space for family movie nights. It was a home designed for the life Charles was building, not the life he'd had. After the twins ran outside to explore the yard, Ashley and Charles stood in the kitchen alone. "This is really happening," Ashley said. "You're really here, in Denver, building a life close to them. I told you I would. I know it took months to prove it, but I meant every word. The space between them felt charged with something neither was quite ready to name. "Can I ask you something?" Ashley said suddenly. "Anything. Why did you choose work over me? 5 years ago, I've never understood it. We were good together. We had plans. And then it was like I became invisible. Like nothing I wanted mattered as much as the next deal, the next acquisition, the next milestone." Charles was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "You weren't invisible. You were the opposite of invisible. You challenged me to be better, to be more authentic, to examine parts of myself I'd spent my whole life avoiding. And that was bad. It was terrifying." Charles met her eyes. "I chose work because it was safe, because achievement was something I could control, because I knew how to succeed at business in a way I didn't know how to succeed at being a partner. You wanted things from me that required vulnerability, and I was too afraid to be vulnerable. So I retreated into the only thing I knew how to do well." Ashley absorbed this in silence. "I know it's not an excuse," Charles continued. "I know explaining why I failed doesn't make the failure less real. But I've spent 3 years in therapy understanding those patterns, learning how to be present instead of productive, learning that vulnerability isn't weakness. And, have you learned? I'm here, aren't I?" Charles gestured at the empty house around them. "I moved my entire life to be close to our children. I restructured a company worth billions because being their father matters more than any business achievement ever could. I'm trying to become someone who chooses people over accomplishments." Ashley felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "I'm scared," she admitted, "of letting you in, of trusting you with more than just co-parenting, of believing that this version of you is real and permanent. I'm scared too." Charles's voice was quiet but steady. "Scared I'll mess this up somehow. Scared I don't deserve the chance you've already given me. Scared that 4 months of proving myself won't be enough to overcome 5 years of absence." He moved closer, not crowding her, but closing some of the distance. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said. "I'm not asking for another chance with you. I know I haven't earned that, and maybe I never will. But Ashley, if you ever decide you want to try, if you ever feel ready to see whether there's something worth rebuilding between us, I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere." The honesty hung between them, raw and vulnerable. Ashley could walk away right now, maintain her boundaries, keep her heart safe behind the walls she'd spent 5 years constructing, or she could take the terrifying step into possibility, into the risk that someone who'd hurt her had actually learned how to love her better. "I need time," she said finally. "More time to see if this stability holds. To trust that you're not going to wake up one day and decide Denver is boring and the twins are too much work. Take all the time you need." "I'm not going anywhere." That phrase became his constant refrain over the months that followed. "I'm not going anywhere." He said it when he showed up for school plays, sitting in a tiny chair surrounded by other parents, looking completely out of place and completely at home. He said it when he coached Bellamy's Little League team, despite knowing almost nothing about baseball beyond the basic rules. He said it when he learned to braid Bella's hair through YouTube tutorials and patient practice, producing results that were objectively terrible, but received with the enthusiasm of a child who understood that effort mattered more than expertise. He said it when work crises arose, and he handled them from Denver instead of flying back to Seattle. When board meetings happened over video call instead of in person. When the company that had once consumed his entire life became something that existed around his family, rather than instead of it. And slowly, over months of consistent presence, Ashley began to believe him. The twins had been calling him Dad for months by the time their 5th birthday arrived. Charles threw them a party in his backyard, nothing excessive. Just family and close friends, cake and games, the kind of celebration that was about joy rather than display. Ashley watched him move through the party with ease, talking to other parents, playing with children, being present in ways the old Charles never would have managed. "He's different, isn't he?" Margot had appeared beside her, holding a cup of punch and watching the same scene. "He is," Ashley admitted. "You believe it now? That he's changed?" "I believe he's committed to changing. That's different from believing the change is permanent. But," she paused, "it's been 8 months, and he hasn't wavered once. Not once, Margot. He shows up, every single time. So, what are you going to do about it?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you going to keep pretending you're just co-parents? Or are you going to admit that something more is happening between you?" Ashley didn't answer immediately. She watched Charles crouch down to help a child who'd fallen, watched him wipe tears and offer comfort with the practiced ease of someone who'd learned to prioritize people over everything else. "I don't know," she said finally. "I don't know what I'm going to do." But that was a lie, and they both knew it. She knew exactly what she was going to do. She just wasn't ready to admit it yet. That night, after the party was over and the twins were exhausted and happy in their beds at Charles's house, Ashley stood on his back porch watching the stars emerge. Charles found her there, 2 glasses of wine in his hands. "I thought you might want this." "Thanks." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the kind of silence that only came from months of learning to be around each other without tension. "I've been thinking," Ashley said finally. "About what?" "About what you said months ago, about being here if I ever wanted to try." Charles went very still beside her. "I think I might be ready to try. Not jumping into anything, not forgetting what happened, but," she took a breath, "seeing if there's something worth rebuilding, beyond the CO parenting, beyond the friendship, seeing if we can be something else." The smile that spread across Charles's face was like watching the sun rise. "Really, really. But Charles," she turned to face him fully, "I need you to understand something. I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago. I'm harder now, more guarded, less willing to ignore red flags or accept less than I deserve. If we do this and you hurt me again, there won't be another chance. Not ever. I understand. And I promise I won't waste this opportunity. I spent 5 years learning to be someone worthy of you. I'm not going to throw that away." He moved closer, carefully, asking permission with his eyes before taking her hand. "Can I take you to dinner? Just us. A real date, where we figure out who we are now, not who we were. I'd like that." It was the beginning of everything. Or rather, it was the beginning of learning whether everything was still possible. Their first real date happened 2 weeks after that conversation on the porch. Ashley spent an embarrassing amount of time choosing an outfit, changing 3 times before settling on a deep burgundy dress that made her feel confident without trying too hard. She kept telling herself this wasn't a big deal. It was just dinner, with a man she'd been married to, who was the father of her children, who she'd spent 5 years actively avoiding and 8 months cautiously allowing back into her life. No pressure at all. Margot came over to watch the twins, who were suspicious about why both their parents were going out without them. "Where are you going?" Bellamy demanded, watching Ashley apply lipstick in the hallway mirror. "Dinner. With Dad?" "Yes. Why can't we come?" "Because sometimes adults need to have conversations without children present." Bella appeared beside her brother, arms crossed with the indignation of someone being deliberately excluded. "Is it a date?" Ashley's hand paused mid-application. "What do you know about dates?" "Maya's mom goes on dates. She says it's when adults dress up fancy and eat food and talk about boring stuff. That's..." Ashley considered how to respond. Not entirely inaccurate. "So it is a date. It's dinner. Whether it's a date is still being determined." Bellamy's expression shifted to something more serious. "Are you going to marry him again?" The question hit Ashley like a physical force. She set down the lipstick and crouched to her son's level. "I don't know, baby. We're just having dinner, seeing if we still like each other as people, not just as your parents. You liked each other before," Bellamy pointed out. "That's why you got married the first time." "That's true, but people change. And sometimes people who liked each other before need to figure out if they still like the people they've become. That seems complicated." "It is complicated." Ashley smiled despite herself. "Most adult things are." "I think you should marry him," Bella announced with the confidence of someone who had solved a particularly tricky puzzle. "Then we could all live together, and I wouldn't have to pack a bag every time I go to Dad's house." "That's not really how you make decisions about marriage." "Why not?" "It's a good reason." Ashley didn't have an answer for that. Charles picked her up at 7, arriving at her door in a suit that probably cost more than her monthly mortgage payment, but wearing an expression of nervous uncertainty that made him look almost boyish. "You look beautiful," he said. "You look terrified." "I am terrified." He admitted it without hesitation. "This feels like the most important dinner of my life, and I'm afraid I'm going to mess it up somehow. That makes 2 of us." They went to a quiet French restaurant that Charles had found through extensive research. It was the kind of place that served food on artistically arranged plates and charged prices that would make most people uncomfortable. But it was also intimate, private, the kind of venue where difficult conversations could happen without an audience. They ordered wine and appetizers and made small talk about the twins and work and the weather, circling around the thing they were actually there to discuss. Finally, Charles set down his fork and looked at her directly. "Can I be honest about something? Please. I've been rehearsing what to say all week. I had this whole speech planned about who I've become and what I've learned and why I deserve another chance. But sitting here across from you, I can't remember any of it." Ashley felt something in her chest loosen slightly. "I had a speech too, about boundaries and expectations and all the ways this could go wrong. Did you also forget it? Most of it. So we're both here without our scripts. Apparently, the silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was contemplative. Two people who'd known each other intimately, then not at all, trying to figure out how to bridge the gap. "Can I tell you what I remember?" Charles asked. "About us, before everything fell apart." "Okay, I remember thinking you were the most interesting person I'd ever met. Not the most beautiful, though you were that too. But interesting. You had opinions about things. You challenged me when I was wrong. You made me think about the world differently. I remember that too. I remember being terrified of losing you, and I remember the exact moment I realized I was pushing you away anyway. It was at dinner, our anniversary, I think. You were telling me about a project you were excited about, and I was on my phone answering emails. You stopped mid-sentence and just looked at me, and I saw it in your eyes. The moment you decided I wasn't going to change." Ashley remembered that dinner. She remembered thinking that she could have burst into flames across the table, and Charles wouldn't have noticed until he smelled smoke. "You never put the phone down," she said quietly. "No, I didn't. I told myself the email was important, that you would understand, that you knew what my career demanded. I understood perfectly. You were telling me exactly where I ranked on your list of priorities." Charles nodded, accepting the accusation without defense. "I was, and you were right to leave. Right to protect yourself and the children from someone who hadn't figured out what actually mattered. He paused. "I wish I'd learned the lesson before it cost me everything." "You have them now," Ashley pointed out. "The twins. They adore you. I know. And I'm grateful for that every single day. But I want more than just being their father. I want a chance to be the partner I should have been 5 years ago. If you're willing to let me try." The waiter appeared with their entrees, breaking the moment with professional timing that was either fortunate or terrible depending on perspective. They ate in thoughtful silence for a few minutes, both processing the conversation. "What if it doesn't work?" Ashley asked finally. "What if we try and it falls apart again? We can't just walk away this time. We have children together. We have to co-parent regardless of what happens between us." "I know. So the stakes are higher. If this fails, it's not just about us. It affects Bellamy and Bella too." "I've thought about that." Charles set down his fork again. "And I think the answer is that we have to be intentional about how we do this. Communicate better than we did before. Address problems when they're small instead of letting them grow. And if at any point it becomes clear that we're not working as a couple, we prioritize the co-parenting relationship above everything else." That sounds very logical. I've been in therapy for 3 years. I've learned to think through emotional situations logically. Ashley almost smiled. "That's actually helpful. The old you would have said something romantic and sweeping without acknowledging the practical complications. The old me was an idiot who thought feelings were enough without the work to sustain them. The old me thought feelings were everything. What does the new you think?" Ashley considered the question seriously. "The new me thinks feelings are important, but not sufficient. That love is a practice, not just an emotion. That you have to choose someone every day, through the boring and the difficult and the mundane, not just when it feels exciting or easy." The new me thinks that too. They finished dinner and walked along the river that cut through downtown Denver. The November air was cold enough to justify walking close together, their shoulders occasionally brushing. "I want to be clear about something," Ashley said. "If we do this, we do it slowly. We've been burned by rushing before." "Agreed. And we keep it separate from the twins for now. They don't need to see us navigating a relationship. It'll confuse them if things change too much too fast." "Also agreed. And I reserve the right to stop at any time. If it feels wrong or if I get scared or if I just need space, I get to say no without having to justify it." "Absolutely. Your boundaries are valid. Always." They stopped at a bench overlooking the water. The city lights reflected on the surface, making everything look slightly magical. "So what happens now?" Charles asked. Now we go home, separately, and we see each other again, soon, and we figure out, one conversation at a time, whether there's still something here worth fighting for. I already know there is, for me at least. I'm not there yet, but I'm willing to find out." Charles smiled at that. A real smile, not the professional one she'd seen him use on investors and board members. "That's more than I deserve, probably, but I'm trying to stop keeping score of what people deserve. It doesn't seem to lead anywhere good." He walked her to her door and stopped on the porch, keeping respectful distance. "Thank you for tonight," he said, "for being willing to try. Thank you for showing up, every day for 8 months, for being the father I wasn't sure you could be. I had a lot of motivation." They stood there for a moment longer, the space between them charged with possibility. "Good night, Charles. Good night, Ashley." He turned and walked back to his car, and she watched him go before slipping inside. Margot was waiting in the living room, with a knowing expression. "Well?" It was. Ashley paused, searching for the right word. "Real. Real as in realistic? Real as in honest. We actually talked about the past, about what went wrong, about what we want now. And what do you want?" "I want to believe that people can change, that I can let someone close without getting destroyed again. That maybe, just maybe, there's a version of this story where everyone ends up okay. That's a lot of wants." "I know." Ashley sank onto the couch beside her friend. "But for the first time in 5 years, I feel like maybe they're not completely impossible." The dating phase of their relationship unfolded slowly, deliberately, with the kind of careful attention that two people who'd been burned before learned to apply. They went on dinners without the children, lunches when schedules allowed, long walks where they talked about everything except the past, learning who they'd become in the years apart. Charles talked about therapy, about the process of unpacking childhood patterns he'd never examined, about learning that his father's emotional absence had taught him to value achievement over connection, and how that lesson had cost him the things that actually mattered. Ashley talked about building her business, about the terror of being pregnant and alone, about the daily choices to keep going when everything in her screamed to fall apart. They argued occasionally, not the cold, distant arguments of their marriage, but the productive kind, the kind where both people said what they actually felt instead of what they thought the other wanted to hear. "You're pulling away," Charles said one night, 3 weeks into their dating experiment. "I can feel you retreating." "I'm not retreating. I'm being careful. There's a difference between careful and closed off. Right now, you're closed off. Maybe that's what careful looks like for me. Or maybe you're testing me, seeing if I'll push or give up." The accuracy of the observation made Ashley uncomfortable. "Is it working?" "I'm not giving up, but I need you to tell me what's going on. I can't fight for us if I don't know what I'm fighting against." The directness was new, the willingness to name uncomfortable truths instead of avoiding them. Ashley found herself responding in kind. "I'm scared," she admitted. "The closer we get, the more I have to lose. And I've spent 5 years convincing myself I don't need anyone. Letting that go feels like jumping off a cliff and hoping the landing is soft." "It does feel like that." Charles moved closer, not touching, but present. "But I've jumped too. I moved my entire life here. I restructured a company. I'm not going anywhere. You keep saying that. Because it's true, and I'll keep saying it until you believe it. What if I never believe it? Then I'll keep saying it anyway." The simplicity of the promise landed somewhere deep in Ashley's chest, not with dramatic impact, but with quiet certainty, the kind that came from sustained action rather than sweeping words. "Okay," she said. "Okay, you believe me? Okay, I'm going to try to believe you, which is the best I can offer right now. I'll take it." The twins noticed, of course. Children always notice more than adults gave them credit for. "You and Dad are being weird," Bellamy announced one morning over breakfast. "Weird how?" "Weird like you keep looking at each other and then looking away really fast, like when Marcus liked Jennifer at school and everyone could tell except them. That's very observant. Are you dating each other?" The question came from Bella, who apparently had been updating her understanding of adult relationships. Ashley searched for age-appropriate language. "We're spending time together to see if we want to be more than just your parents, like boyfriend and girlfriend, something like that." "Cool." Bella returned to her cereal with remarkable nonchalance. "Can we get a dog if you get married?" "Who said anything about getting married?" "No one. But if you do, can we get a dog?" Ashley looked at her daughter with a mixture of exasperation and amusement. We'll discuss pets if and when any decisions about marriage happen, which is not happening right now, but maybe later? Maybe. Possibly. We'll see. That means probably. Bellamy interpreted for his sister. Adults say we'll see when they mean probably. Adults say we'll see when they're not sure yet. Same thing. 4 months into their dating relationship, Ashley realized she'd stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. It was a Tuesday. Nothing special about it. Charles was at her apartment, helping Bellamy with a school project about bridge architecture, while Bella showed Ashley the latest chapter in her ongoing dragon saga. The scene was domestic, ordinary, the kind of moment that would have been unremarkable in any other context. But Ashley looked at it and realized she wasn't afraid anymore. Not that the fear was completely gone. It never would be probably, but it had shifted from active terror to background awareness, like the difference between standing in the middle of a highway and standing on the sidewalk beside it. The danger still existed, but she wasn't directly in its path. That night, after the twins were in bed and Charles was getting ready to leave, she caught his arm in the hallway. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course. I think I'm falling in love with you again." The words came out before she could second-guess them, before she could build walls around them or coat them in qualifications and caveats. Charles went completely still. "You are?" "I think so. I've been trying to analyze it, figure out if it's real, or if I just want it to be real because it would make everything easier. But I keep coming back to the same conclusion. I look forward to seeing you. I miss you when you're not here. I find myself thinking about you when I'm supposed to be thinking about other things. Ashley, I'm not saying this to pressure you into anything. I know we agreed to go slowly. She took a breath. I spent 5 years convincing myself I would never feel this way about anyone again, especially you. And now I do, and it feels important to say it out loud instead of pretending it isn't happening." Charles raised his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face with the tenderness that made her eyes sting. "I've been in love with you since the charity gala," he said. "Since I saw you standing there with our children and realized what an idiot I'd been to ever let you go. I didn't say it because I didn't want to scare you. I didn't want you to feel pressured or rushed. But Ashley," his voice cracked slightly, "I love you. I never stopped loving you. I just finally learned how to love you properly." The first kiss was soft, tentative, 2 people rediscovering something they'd thought was lost forever. The second kiss was more certain. By the third, Ashley had stopped counting. "Now, before I continue with what happened next, I need to pause one more time and speak directly to you. We've come so far in this story, from that first shocking meeting at the charity gala to this moment in Ashley's hallway where 2 people are finally admitting what's been building between them. If you've made it this far, if you're invested in Ashley and Charles finding their way back to each other, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to believe in second chances. Drop a comment telling me whether you think they can make it work this time. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now is the time. Turn on notifications, because the final part of this story is about to answer the question we've all been asking. Can broken things really be rebuilt? Can the people who hurt us actually become the people who heal us? Stay with me. We're almost at the end. The months that followed were the happiest of Ashley's life, which was terrifying in its own way because happiness felt fragile, like something that could be taken away at any moment. But it wasn't taken away. Charles continued showing up, day after day, week after week, month after month. He was present for the ordinary moments and the extraordinary ones, the school plays and the sick days, the arguments about homework and the celebrations of small victories. He was there when Bella decided she wanted to learn piano and changed her mind after 2 lessons because piano was boring actually. He was there when Bellamy won 2nd place in a regional science fair with a project about sustainable bridge design for urban environments. He was there for the mundane Tuesday evenings when nothing special happened except 4 people eating dinner together and talking about their days. And somewhere in the middle of all that ordinary living, Ashley stopped waiting for disaster. She stopped flinching when Charles's phone rang, expecting him to prioritize work over family. She stopped analyzing every interaction for signs that he was reverting to old patterns. She stopped protecting herself so fiercely that she couldn't be touched. 1 year after that first dinner date, they were in Charles's kitchen after the twins had gone to bed. Ashley was washing dishes, which had become their quiet ritual, The time when they could talk without small ears listening. "I want to ask you something," Charles said, drying a plate with deliberate care. "And I want you to think about it before you answer. Really think about it." "That sounds ominous." "It's not. At least I hope it's not." He set down the plate and the towel and turned to face her fully. "I want to marry you. Again. I want to do it right this time. With presence and priority and all the things I got wrong before." Ashley's hand stilled in the soapy water. "Charles, I know it might be too soon. I know there might be reasons to wait. But I've spent the last year proving to you and to myself that I can be the partner you deserve. And I want to make it permanent. I want to build a life with you and our children. A real life, not just parallel lives that occasionally intersect." He reached into his pocket and produced a ring box. When he opened it, Ashley saw a diamond that was beautiful but modest. Nothing like the ostentatious ring he'd given her the first time around. "I learned that too," he said softly. "That love isn't measured in carats." Ashley looked at the ring. At Charles, at the life they'd built together over the past 18 months, there were 1,000 reasons to hesitate. 1,000 warnings from her past screaming that this was how she'd gotten hurt before. 1,000 walls she could throw up to protect herself from potential future pain. She ignored all of them. "Yes," she said. Charles's face split into a smile of pure, unguarded joy. "Really? Really? But Charles," she pulled her hands from the dishwater and wiped them on a towel. "If you ever again prioritize quarterly earnings over a dance recital, I will end you." He laughed, slipping the ring onto her finger. "Noted. Permanently." They told the twins the next morning. Bella shrieked with excitement and immediately demanded to be involved in every aspect of wedding planning. "Can I be the flower girl? Can I pick my own dress? Can we have cake at the wedding? Can we have a lot of cake?" "Yes, to all of the above," Charles assured her. Bellamy was more measured in his response, but his smile betrayed genuine happiness. "I'm glad," he said simply. "I knew this was going to happen." "You did? You and Mom were being weird for a whole year. It was obviously leading somewhere. You're too smart for your own good." "I know. Can I be the ring bearer?" "Absolutely." Ashley watched her children process this news with the adaptability that continued to amaze her. They'd been raised in complexity, had learned that families came in different configurations, that life rarely followed predictable paths. This shift in their structure wasn't confusing to them. It was simply the next chapter. "Does this mean we can get a dog now?" Bella asked. "Let's focus on the wedding first," Ashley replied. "But after the wedding? We'll discuss it." "That means probably. That means we'll discuss it." The wedding happened 3 months later. Not a grand affair. Not the kind of society spectacle that Charles could have afforded or that Ashley's design expertise could have orchestrated. Just a simple ceremony in Charles's backyard, transformed with elegant simplicity into something magical. The guest list was intimate. Family and close friends only. The people who'd witnessed the journey, who understood that this wasn't a fairy tale ending, but something harder earned and more precious. The twins took their roles extremely seriously. Bellamy carried the rings on a velvet pillow with the focused attention of someone performing surgery. Bella scattered flower petals with artistic intention, making sure each one landed in exactly the right spot to create the pattern she'd envisioned. Both of them gave speeches that made everyone cry. "I'm glad you came back," Bella told Charles, standing on a step stool to reach the microphone. "Mom was sad before, even though she pretended she wasn't. But now she smiles for real." "I knew you would be a good dad," Bellamy added. "From the first time we met. You listened when I talked about bridges. Most grown-ups don't listen. But you did." When Ashley walked down the aisle, Charles's expression made every hard moment of the past 2 years worth it. He looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. The vows they'd written were simple, honest, forged in the fire of failure and rebuilt with intention. "I promise to be present," Ashley said. "Not just physically, but emotionally. To show up for the difficult conversations and the ordinary moments. To trust you with my fears and my hopes. To choose you every day, even when choosing feels hard." "I promise to prioritize you," Charles replied. "Over work and achievement and everything I once thought mattered more than it did. I promise to communicate instead of retreating. To fight fair. To remember that you are my partner, not someone to be scheduled around. I promise to be patient," Ashley continued, "with your growth and my own. to allow for mistakes without keeping score, to believe in the person you've become rather than staying trapped in anger at the person you were. I promise to stay, Charles finished, no matter what. Through sickness and health and boring Tuesdays and difficult years, I promise that I'm not going anywhere, ever. The minister pronounced them married, and the small crowd of people who loved them erupted into cheers. Bella threw herself at both of them, wrapping her arms around their legs. "We're a real family now," she announced. "We were always a real family," Ashley told her. "This just makes it official. Now, can we talk about the dog?" Charles laughed and scooped her up. "Yes, now we can talk about the dog." The first year of their second marriage was different from anything Ashley had expected. Not perfect. Nothing was ever perfect, but real in ways that made imperfection feel like a feature rather than a flaw. They argued sometimes about household responsibilities and parenting decisions and whose turn it was to handle school pickup. But the arguments were productive. They ended in understanding rather than cold silence. Charles kept his promises. He was present for dance recitals and science fairs. He rearranged meetings instead of missing family dinners. He learned that sometimes the most important thing he could do was simply sit on the couch and watch a children's movie for the 14th time, because Bella wasn't ready to move on to something else yet. Ashley learned to let go, to stop waiting for disaster, to accept that people could change and stay changed if they did the work consistently enough. They got a dog, a golden retriever named Biscuit, who immediately became Bella's best friend and Bellamy's reluctant companion. Charles pretended to be overwhelmed by the chaos of pet ownership, while secretly sneaking Biscuit treats when he thought no one was watching. They faced challenges. Charles's company had a difficult quarter that required more of his attention than usual. Ashley's firm took on a project that stretched her capacity and her sanity. The twins went through phases of testing boundaries and pushing back against rules, normal challenges, the kind that every family faced, and they navigated them together. One year after the wedding, Ashley stood at the window of their combined household, the house Charles had bought in Wash Park, now fully theirs, filled with evidence of the life they'd built. The twins' artwork covered the refrigerator in layers. Biscuit's toys littered the living room despite regular cleanup attempts. Photos lined the walls, family portraits and candid moments, and the kind of ordinary documentation that proved a life was being lived fully. Charles came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything," she replied. "How different my life is now compared to 2 years ago. How scared I was when I walked into that charity gala. How certain I was that you would let me down. And now I'm glad I was wrong. About you. About whether people could change. About whether I could ever let anyone close again. I'm glad you were wrong too." Charles pressed a kiss to her temple. "Every day I get with you feels like a gift I didn't earn. You earned it, through months and months of showing up, of keeping promises, of doing the work even when it was hard. The work is the easy part, when you know what you're working for." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the evening settle over their neighborhood. The twins were upstairs, audibly negotiating about something involving Biscuit and an elaborate imaginary scenario. The sound of their voices, so different and so complementary, drifted down through the floorboards. "We made good kids," Charles said. "We did, mostly by accident on your part." He laughed at that. "Fair. I didn't contribute much to the first 5 years. You're contributing now. That's what matters. Do you think they're happy?" "I think they're as happy as children can be. Which is to say, sometimes very happy and sometimes dramatically devastated over minor inconveniences. Normal kid stuff, normal kid stuff." Charles repeated the words like they were precious. "I never knew how much I wanted normal until I had it." "Me neither. I spent so long surviving that I forgot what living felt like. And now I remember." She turned in his arms to face him. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not giving up. When I pushed you away. When I tested you. When I made it as hard as possible to earn my trust. You kept showing up anyway. I didn't have a choice. You and the kids. You're everything. That's what you said at the gala. That you wanted to be in their lives. That they were everything. I meant it then. I mean it more now. What changed?" "I got to know them." Charles's voice was thick with emotion. "I got to watch Bellamy light up when he figures out how something works. I got to hear Bella sing off-key in the car like it's the most natural thing in the world. I got to be there for homework and arguments, and the moment they finally understand something they've been struggling with. Those are good moments. They're the best moments. Every single one of them. And I almost missed all of it. But you didn't. But I didn't. Because you gave me a chance. Ashley reached up to touch his face. We gave each other a chance. That's what matters. That's what we did right. You did most of the work. Raising them alone. Building your career. Protecting yourself and them from someone who hadn't earned the right to be in your lives. And then I let you in. That was work too. Harder work in some ways. I know. And I'm grateful. Every day. For the rest of my life. The sounds from upstairs had shifted to giggles, which was either a good sign or a very bad one depending on what they were laughing about. We should probably check on them, Charles said. Probably. But Ashley didn't move. She was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. First, tell me something. Anything. Are you happy? The question was the same one he'd asked her over ice cream nearly 2 years ago, back when she'd said she was content, when she'd settled for stability over joy. I'm the happiest I've ever been, he said. Genuinely, completely. I didn't know happiness like this existed until I found it with you and Bellamy and Bella. It's not the happiness I thought I wanted. It's louder and messier, and it comes with a dog who keeps eating things he shouldn't. But it's real. It's mine. It's ours. Ashley smiled. Good answer. What about you? Are you happy? She considered the question seriously, the way she'd learned to consider everything in her rebuilt life. I'm happy, she said. Not just content, not just surviving. Actually, genuinely happy. I didn't think that was possible anymore. I thought the best I could hope for was keeping everyone fed and the business running and making it to bedtime without anyone crying, including me. And now? Now I wake up looking forward to the day. I go to bed feeling like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I look at my life and I don't see something I'm enduring. I see something I chose. You chose me. I chose all of it. You and the twins, and this house, and this dog that keeps destroying my shoes. I chose to believe that second chances were real. And I was right. The giggles upstairs had escalated to shrieks, which definitely required parental investigation. Duty calls, Charles said. It does. But Charles? Yeah? I love you. Just in case I don't say it enough. You say it exactly the right amount. And I love you too. More than I have words for. Then let's go see what chaos our children have created and deal with it together. Together. I like the sound of that. They climbed the stairs side by side, following the sounds of laughter to discover that Bella had dressed Biscuit in a princess costume from her dress-up collection, while Bellamy documented the entire process for what he claimed was a scientific experiment about canine fashion tolerance. It was ridiculous. It was chaotic. It was exactly the kind of ordinary moment that families remembered years later with fondness. And standing in that doorway, watching her children and her dog and the man who'd earned his way back into her heart, Ashley knew with absolute certainty that this was what she'd been fighting for all along. Not survival, not just getting by. This, love that was messy and complicated and earned through the hard work of showing up every single day. Family that was built not from perfection but from the choice to keep trying even when it was difficult. Happiness that felt dangerous precisely because it was real, because losing it would mean something, because it mattered in ways that playing it safe never could. She'd spent 5 years believing that the best she could hope for was keeping her children safe and her heart protected. She'd been wrong. The best she could hope for was exactly what she had, a life full of noise and chaos and love. A partner who'd learned from his failures and proved through his actions that change was possible. Children who were growing into people she admired and enjoyed and was endlessly grateful to know. A second chance that had somehow become her first choice. And if you're watching this right now, if you've made it to the end of this story, I hope you take something with you. Second chances are real. Not easy, not guaranteed, but real. People can change. Not overnight, not without effort, but fundamentally, permanently, if they're willing to do the work. And the walls we build to protect ourselves from pain can also become the walls that keep us from living fully. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is tear them down and risk being hurt again for the possibility of something beautiful. Ashley Campbell and Charles Brooks found their way back to each other through months of difficult conversations and years of consistent effort, through arguments and forgiveness and the daily choice to keep showing up. Their story didn't end with a wedding. It continued, messy and imperfect, and full of the kind of joy that only comes from truly earned happiness. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all. The story isn't over until you decide it is. So if you're in the middle of your own difficult chapter, if you're wondering whether it's worth it to keep trying, if you're standing at the edge of a second chance and you're not sure whether to take it, remember Ashley and Charles. Remember that broken things can be rebuilt, that the person who hurt you might genuinely be capable of becoming someone better. That survival is admirable, but it's not the same as living. Take the risk. Open the door. See what happens when you choose hope over fear. You might be surprised what's waiting on the other side. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this story. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And until next time, keep believing that the best chapters of your story might still be ahead of you.